So I'm just going to describe how I got to do this work, because I think it's quite an interesting journey. Obviously I'm biased, but I think it's just nice that people understand how I got to do this. So when I was 19, I started working as a stripper. I had a ordinary job for 10 months, and I really wasn't that into ordinary jobs. So I met someone in the beauty therapy job that I was in who was working as an erotic dancer, and it just sounded really great to me. It sounded like the best thing ever. So within a week I'd quit my job and I'd started working in erotic dance, and I did that for 6 years, mostly because there was nothing else that I wanted to do. I traveled the world. Once I discovered I could work in different countries, I went to 12 different countries, and I was having I guess for a early 20-year-old, the time of my life. I discovered a lot of things about sex that I hadn't come across in normal culture. Things like sex is playful, sex is fun. I had a real understanding of the power that women have over men in sex, and how that can either be, you can manipulate men that way, or you can just share that with them and it can be beautiful and playful. But yeah, strip clubs are not always a great environment, as are, same as any environment that has alcohol included. That, it's not the most conscious environment, let me put it that way. But I really discovered some beautiful things that I hadn't expected to discover in that environment. So towards the end of my time in dancing and stripping, I realized that I had a lot of emotional stuff that I needed to work through. I kind of knew that already, but it got to a point where I was in really awful relationships. I just wasn't happy with myself, so I ended up stopping. I had a lot of physical issues too. I had chronic fatigue and polycystic ovaries and loads of stuff that just needed attending to: emotional, physical, mental, everything. So I ended up having a period of about 5 or 6 years then where I had to quit work and I just worked on myself, basically. And in that time I did lots of therapy, lots of workshops, received lots of healing, received a lot of body work. One of the things that I was very drawn to was something called Craniosacral Therapy. It's a very subtle, hands-on body work, but it helps facilitate emotional release. So I received a lot of those sessions, and I kind of realized that I wanted to work in that area. I wanted to work in healing, because it had been such a profound, it had just helped me a huge amount. So I started training in craniosacral therapy and doing other workshops, Reiki and Tantra workshops, and just exploring the whole arena of healing, really. And yeah, towards the end, there's no end of healing, but towards the end of that period, I met John, and he was the one who suggested the idea of sexual healing work to me. I never knew that existed as a job. But he had seen a couple of people online that he knew about who did this quite publicly, and he said, why don't you start working sexual healing? And it made sense to me because both of my influences, there was the sexual stuff and there was the healing stuff, and suddenly I had a possibility for doing something, finding my path, I suppose. I was scared that I might be one of those people that never finds their thing, because I was just following whatever I felt like doing at the time, and I didn't really seem to have a direction. But suddenly I had one. And then I spent the next 5 or so years doing every course and workshop and session on conscious sexuality and sexual healing and Tantra and Taoism and anything else connected in that area. So the place that I've got to in my sexuality is that I can easily have whole body orgasms simply by breathing for 4 or 5 breaths. If somebody strokes me in a certain way, anywhere on my body, not genital touch, just anywhere on my body, I can go into whole body orgasms quite easily. So, hey, welcome. that is quite unusual. Some people find that themselves, not many, but I've done a lot of work on opening up to pleasure. This kind of work is always something that you do for yourself, but you do it also so that you can teach others. That's what happens when you end up being a therapist. There's always a dual path. So I'm going to talk a bit about what blocks people from expanded states of pleasure. And a lot of it is messages, maybe that we heard, or maybe that we just understood in our childhood from our family, from society, from school, from religion. The first one and the most pervasive one, I think, is that sex is shameful. There's something shameful about sex. And the contributors to that message could be organized religion, or particularly more recent religion. I know paganism was a lot more focused on sexuality and fertility, but more recently, perhaps Christianity has really shut down that connection with our sexuality and that awe of fertility and sex that we had previously. Sex, there's a way of manipulating and controlling people, and you can use sex to do that quite easily. I think our sexual connection is very much our power, if we're really thoroughly connected to it, and when that's taken away, people are easier to control. So shame is generally passed down through generations. We are often unconsciously affected by this stuff. It may be that our parents or our peer group never said anything directly to us, but we kind of pick up this idea that it's shameful. Yes, we have had the sexual revolution and things have changed massively, but there is still that unconscious echo of this perhaps religious, who knows, influence that really shut us down sexually. And a way that you can test that in your own experience, this may not be the case for everybody, but ask yourself how your parents were around sex. Did they speak to you about it openly and joyously and without embarrassment and give you enough information? Usually the answer to that is, it wasn't that great. So in this environment, how do we learn about sex if few people can teach it thoroughly? How do we find anything out? So influencers recently are generally porn, movie sex, and just bumbling along and finding out what you can as you go along. And that's really great if you find an experienced, shame-free lover who's willing to teach you the art and skill of lovemaking. And if you're meeting other people who have a similar level or worse level of shame to you, then you probably won't learn very much. You'll be guessing what they like at best. I often have a lot of male clients who are in relationships with women, and they say they want to learn how to please their partners, and they say, but the female partner won't tell me what she likes. And I'm like, wow, that's a really difficult situation to, I can't teach you what she likes. I can teach you some things that she might, but if there's no communication, it's very hard to learn. That's what I'm trying to say. We also don't have any rites of passage anymore. There's not really anything in our culture to mark that change from being a child to an adult. There's nothing where we honor that. There's nothing where we really acknowledge it. And I'd like to ask you just to, I'm just going to guide you through something. If you want to close your eyes, just imagine the most positive sense of what I'm describing to you. So imagine as you're a younger person, you're moving from that transition of being a child into an adult, you're in the beginning of puberty. And imagine that there was a ritual created for you where you were honored and initiated into sexual pleasure with an older trusted member of your community or tribe guiding you in a sensual sexual experience where nothing was expected of you. It was a space to explore at your pace. It was a service to you. Just holding that vision in the most positive sense possible. And how different things after that may have been for you. While you have your eyes closed, I'm going to read 2 quotes from a teacher, Margot Anand, who has been teaching Tantra since I was born. And she says, erotic experience is a celebration, an act of creation, and an art. Orgasm is not just a sexual event, but can be expanded to embrace the body, mind, heart, and spirit. So just soak those up. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes again. So did anybody hear those kind of messages in their sexual education? It's not usual. It does happen, but not usual. I'm going to read a whole load of other unhelpful messages that I come across. Things like big penis equals better orgasms. Only big breasts are sexy. Harder and faster is best. Foreplay is just a prelude to the real thing, which is intercourse. There's only one way to do it right. Orgasm is the goal. Good girls don't. Men should always initiate sex. Male ejaculation and orgasm are the same thing. And monogamy is the highest moral way to have sex. Penetration can happen in minutes and will be ecstatic. You may have picked that up from movies where it happens really, really quickly. Having fun is wasting time. Pleasure is selfish. So none of those messages would lead us to a place of expansive sexual experiences. There are going to be solutions at the end. I know this is a bit heavy and dark. So habit is another thing that can get in the way of us having expansive sexual pleasure. Much of sex is learned responses, so we learn something that works and then we go, yeah, great, we'll do that again and again and again. And we might change the order a bit, but we're kind of on rails with sexual practice, and until we're really encouraged to try different things, we don't often do that. So particularly with how we get to orgasm, we'll often follow the same path. And that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but it just means that you're missing some of the other possibilities on the journey. Say, for example, a man who learned to masturbate in a culture of shame, in a family where it was very shameful, he would be making sure he was in a private room, he'd be kind of hiding, he'd probably be hurrying, and he'd be trying to get it over and done with without getting caught. So that would set up a pattern of a very fast masturbation, which generally is not very expansive. It's generally, the pleasure is located just in the genitals, it's not able to flow through the rest of the body, and you just miss a lot of gold on the journey if you're chasing the orgasm. I'll cover that more later. So other things that shut down pleasure, lack of variety of touch. Oftentimes we learn certain ways to touch ourselves or each other, and then we don't explore like maybe softer touch or whole body stroking or variety of touch, so some light and some soft. Touching too hard can create a sense of numbness. Like sometimes we might think that harder is better, but what that can do is cause a little bit of guarding in the tissues, so almost like we're touching too hard, and then there's more stimulation, but the body shuts down its pleasure responses, so you need to then touch even harder, and it's a negative cycle. There's something about less is more with pleasure. So moving too quickly to genital touch, which is generally how it goes in porn and in movie sex, because they don't have a whole movie to explore an hour of foreplay. Where movie sex is hot because it's, whatever they've, whatever the movie has set up, and there's been this big build up, the sex is usually really quick. I don't recommend that for expansive pleasure anyway. There's nothing wrong with quickies, but they won't take you into those expansive whole body orgasms. Not touching or awakening the whole body. If we keep the focus of touch just around like the usual areas, so kissing and maybe breast touch and genital touch, you're missing a whole lot of whole body pleasure. Not breathing much is another thing that will really shut our pleasure down. I don't know where that message comes from, but you can kind of get a sense of how we're not supposed to breathe audibly. If you think of this scenario, imagine being in a lift or an elevator, and there's a few other people in the elevator with you, and you take a really big, loud, deep breath, and then you sigh it out really, really loudly. They'd think that you were really odd, wouldn't they? They'd stare at you, and you'd feel probably quite uncomfortable. What we do is we breathe just enough to survive, but we don't breathe enough to, you'll see this in the meditation at the end. Breathing more generally will allow the body to feel more. I don't know how it works, but it does. Staying really still, or tensing towards the orgasm, but I'll cover staying really still first. So for sexual energy to move through our body, it's really great to move our body a bit. If we stay really still, it just limits the experience. It means that you don't have as... I can't really describe why that works, but it does. Tensing towards the orgasm is another habit that people often get into, where they're almost rushing it, trying to make it happen more quickly. And it just short circuits everything. You don't have the expansive experiences that can happen in the build-up. So is anyone ready for solutions yet? That was a lot of negative messages that we've come across. So generally, the beginning, I suppose, is opening up your understanding of pleasure and orgasm. And a saying that I'm often repeating with sex and pleasure is that way more than you think is possible is possible. So sometimes just taking in these concepts, like I've been at a female ejaculation workshop where the female teacher used to say that even if women just know that female ejaculation is possible, that evening they might go home and some of them will have that experience with their lover just by knowing that it's possible. No coaching, no instruction, nothing involved. So there really is quite a lot of there's a lot in intention, there's a lot in opening up to possibilities. The first Tantra workshop that I ever went to, there was lots of things that we did in the workshop. It was a whole weekend where we did lots of things that built up the possibility for sexual energy moving through our bodies. So things like ecstatic dance, things like massage, not genital touch, just other places, meditation. And at the end of the session, the teacher had us lie in a mandala, like a circular pattern on the floor, and we were kind of all touching in different ways. Not genital touch, we were all clothed. It wasn't overtly sexual at all. But I had my first whole body orgasm in that setting. So first of all, I heard other people making sounds of pleasure, and it was totally new to me. I'd never experienced anything like this before. And I couldn't really see what was happening, but I could hear these sounds of pleasure, and I was thinking, oh, that's a bit odd, what's going on there? And then a little bit later, there was this thing started happening to my body, where my body was kind of moving on its own, and I had these feelings of joy and bliss and just pleasure moving through me. So who'd have thought, from lying on the floor in a circle with a bunch of partial strangers, that you can have an experience like that. So really just expanding the possibility that orgasm can be many different things. It can be in many different places, so nipples, G-spot, cervical, but then also things like kissing. You can orgasm from kissing, from giving oral sex, with non-sexual whole body stroking that can trigger whole body orgasms. Random things like your shin. I've had clients have orgasms in their shin in sessions with me. Your tummy, your third eye point, that's one that I've experienced. Just through breathing, simply through breathing is a way into orgasm, and it can take a little while to learn, but the more you practice it, the easier it is. The whole body can be in an orgasmic response, and even the energetic body. There's lots of philosophies that talk about the energetic body that is outside of us, the aura, whatever you call it. So really just allowing that possibility to soak into your awareness. And a few attitudes that really help with having more pleasure is self-love. I'm sure we've all heard it before, and it's quite difficult. It's simple but not easy. But basically the principle of self-love in this scenario, loving yourself means that you deserve the experience of ecstasy. One of my teachers, Barbara Carellis, she wrote a book titled Ecstasy is Necessary. And she's describing literally how we need these ecstatic experiences to feel okay, to bond with people, to have our hormonal system work properly. So cultivating pleasure. Often to get to that point, we have to clear a lot of negative beliefs, maybe some that I mentioned before, but usually the one that I do a lot with clients is something like, I don't really deserve pleasure. Of course, nobody's thinking that consciously, but it's often a message that we've embodied, we've taken on. And to cultivate pleasure, it really helps to do practices. Having some emotional release body work can really help, because there's a way that we store emotions in our body, and that can often block pleasure flowing through us, or sexual energy flowing through us. It sounds a bit woo, but it really works. It has to be experienced to be understood. So I often give my clients self-pleasuring rituals. I'm actually going to email one of those out for you guys if you leave your email for me. So really things that you are doing, not things that you're thinking about. You can't really think your way out of this. It's practices. And Tantra, if you've all heard of Tantra, is basically a set of practices through which you realize your higher self, I suppose. So yeah, making time to immerse yourself in pleasure. It's often the last thing that we do. It's often the thing that is just, there's no room for it because we're too busy. We've scheduled everything else in, but we haven't scheduled some time to really have pleasure, either on our own or with a lover. Meditation is another one. So often we have so much stimulation in our lives, particularly with all the devices that we own. A lot of people here are online kind of people. There's a lot of demands on us now, so doing a meditation is a way of coming more into the body. So bringing yourself down from all of this thought, this external stuff, the future, the past, and really clearing yourself so that you can focus more on bodily sensations. So when I'm meditating, I have a daily meditation practice that most days I actually do it. I often have experiences where I feel like there's sexual energy moving through me, just from meditating, no stimulation at all, just lying there, focusing on my body. And it feels like the universe is making love to me. It's quite a special experience. And you can get there too, it just takes a little bit of practice. So yeah, giving up goals is another one. And yeah, enjoying pleasure without expecting it to go anywhere particular. And particularly orgasm. So if we're expecting orgasm or a particular kind of orgasm, usually the more friction-based orgasms, if we're expecting those, it often means we're not open to other expansive experiences. almost surrendering to whatever's going to happen without kind of going down our usual track of, oh, well, if I do this, then I'll get an orgasm. Yeah, surrender. So surrendering and opening to pleasure without being focused on it being a certain way. So the how-to. There's a few very simple tools that you can use to, not guarantee, but to open the possibility of having more expansive orgasms. You'll hear a lot about breath, sound and movement in both tantric practice and Taoist philosophy. They're both philosophies that do address sexuality. They don't ignore it like some religions do. But yeah, the three tools that you'll hear a lot about are breath, sound and movement. So the breath that I teach my clients is a very simple breathing in and inflating the lower belly on the in-breath, so breathing in through the nose, and then breathing out and the belly kind of comes back in. And you sigh the breath out. I'll demonstrate it to you and you can join in with me whenever you're ready. So breathing in through the nose, and the lower belly comes out. And sighing out the out breath. You can put your hand on your lower belly just to see that it is inflating on the in-breath. So this kind of breathing takes you into the rest and digest side of the nervous system and out of the fight or flight side. It's the way that we breathe when we're sleeping. And the reason that I'm asking you to sigh on the out breath is because that is a way of ensuring that we're not controlling the out breath. So it's almost a release, a letting go. And yeah, sounds kind of come in with breath. So the sigh that I was asking you to do is a way of releasing tension, basically. And as you're in your self-pleasuring, or if you're with a lover, if you can practice that kind of breathing, it will feel strange at first. But the more you do it, the more the breath and the sounds merge together. So with sounds, I do recommend making sounds of pleasure. And they kind of happen on the out breath. It's hard to describe, but the more you practice it, the easier it gets and the less silly you feel. Movement is something that may happen to you just from doing that breath, but you may also have to act as if and do a little bit of movement. Say it in the meditation later, we'll practice this. But moving your pelvis. The pelvis is seen as kind of the seat of energy. You may have heard about the Kundalini energy that moves through the body, the chakra system. So it's said that the energy lies dormant in the perineum and it can be awoken and move up the body. So yeah, moving the body is a way of igniting that sexual energy moving through your body. Touching the whole body, if you're doing a self-pleasuring ritual, so light flowing touch through the whole of your body, hair, head, face, feet, every part of your body. It's something that really explores that less is more that I was talking about. So really, really light touch. It almost allows your senses to move towards the touch rather than harder touch where you kind of retreat from it. Yeah, I'm touching the whole body. And when I teach tantric massage to people, I teach them to try and move, like if the person's lying here, to try and move across the whole of the body to awaken the whole body. And you can use variety in that, so you can use your nails, you can use a feather or something that's slightly furry to really bring in some variety of that touch. That's great to do at the beginning of a lovemaking session. Moving sexual energy through your body is something that may just happen, but you can also do it with your hands. So this light flowing touch, you can also intend that you're moving sexual energy through the body. It sounds really woo-woo, and a lot of this stuff does until you experience it. It's actually very hard to explain these things. And yeah, having whole body, not only genital experiences. So where a lot of the focus has been on genital pleasure, it's easy for the rest of the body to just kind of not feel anything. So if you're touching the whole of the body, you're really cueing the whole body to have that experience rather than just focusing on the genitals. So that's pretty much it for the talk.